Cosmetic family.
Thanks for joining us on the Cosmetic Podcast.
Cosmetic means being a person or thing that gives rise to a phenomenon that is dynamic or energizing.
We're tackling topics and telling the truth.
I'm Rodrigo Ross.
I'm Keith Benson.
So today our topic is, brother, can you spare a dime? So, okay, first a little backstory. There was a song that was called Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, right? And it was created in the Great Depression to talk about this whole idea of poverty and impoverishment. And so today we are talking about what is the poverty rate in Dallas, who profits from poverty, and what organizations are really trying to do something to combat it.
So when you take a look at Dallas and the poverty facts, there's some data that came out, says since 2000, so the number of people in poverty in the city of Dallas increased 40%.
Wow.
That's just crazy. So you're looking at a city's total population that's increased only by 7.6%.
Right.
But yet
right.
poverty 40%.
Yeah. So just in the last year alone, from like 2019 to 2020, poverty went from 17.5% up to 18.9%. In Dallas, in the city of Dallas.
What are you seeing? I mean, I know you're out there, frontline work. When we went through this, when our doors were shut, you helped pivot and you helped start what we call now the Catalyst Initiative. Start doing some food distribution. I mean, what did you see? What are you hearing from people that are in these vulnerable situations?
Unfortunately, I see the statistics playing out. So, across Texas, the average poverty level is about 13.7, right? So Dallas pre-pandemic was already at 17.5. During the pandemic, we jumped up to 18.9. And I think that's because not only did you have a generous portion of the population that was already in poverty, you had a substantial amount that was just teetering on the edge. And this pandemic has unfortunately pushed them to the other side. So, I was telling another group of folks that I was talking to, during our distributions, you see more and more people that are accessing that free food and those free essentials that have never really interfaced with these kinds of systems before. Like people who live in chronic poverty for generations, they know where to go to get help. But people who this is new to, they don't have a clue where to go. And there are these pride factors and there are all these other things that come into play. And I'm seeing more and more people who are really, being pushed into this space who really feel lost in this idea of being poor.
And it's impacting our black and brown people, right?
Yeah.
So we talk about almost 28% Hispanic and almost 31% African Americans are in poverty. When I look at our distribution lines that we've had, it's definitely been our black and brown counterparts that have been coming through our lines, and it's not so much. And I heard it's not so much all people that when you quote unquote like poor, right? But it is people who look. I am making it from day to day, and I need this extra, and I can't tell you how appreciative people are of that. I mean, thank you guys for doing this. And I mean, and it's I had one guy like, hey man, you guys blessed me. I just wanted to give this to you all, since you guys been such a blessing to me.
And I mean, it makes sense because the reality is there are more than 27,000 Dallas residents who live in poverty, but they have full-time jobs, right? So imagine if you have a full-time job and you're struggling when the rest of the community starts to constrain and they're struggling, you even get pushed further behind. And a big chunk of that number is single moms. And so those who are affected, they can't find childcare. So now their work schedules may be disrupted, or they've had to make the decision whether they have to stay home with children for virtual learning or whether to go to school. They are really feeling the brunt of poverty in Dallas.
Yeah, it broke my heart when you talk about, staying home for the online learning. Talking to a person that was part-time staff worker, and she, her son was home, and fortunately that she stayed with her mom for her mom to be able to deliver the online curriculum. So I was like, well, man, if your mom wasn't there, what happen?
What would you do?
She said, I would have to quit my job. I was like, man, so this pandemic has put people, in this vulnerable position, as it relates to, dealing with, different issues that it's going through.
Yeah. And, there are a lot of people out there who have their opinions about what could be done, what could not be done. But, for as far back, even pre-pandemic, for as far back as about 2 or 3 years ago, there has been kind of this siren being rung in Dallas that's saying that, you know, as a city, is Dallas doing the best that it can in helping its poorest residents escape poverty? And there is some fairly credible evidence to say maybe not. So you just have to really think, because a city with these kinds of poverty levels, you don't get those numbers overnight, right? Like, for many of the folks who are in poverty, this is a generational thing. Like, they were born in poverty, their parents were poor, sometimes their grandparents are poor, and unfortunately their children almost seem destined for that same outcome.
I mean, there's some organizations out there, I think, that are definitely doing some very proactive things to be able to. Harmony Ministries, that's a part of Concord Church. My man Mark Porter over there, man, they do a fantastic job. And you're a Concordian yourself, right? I
am. Shout out.
All right, shout out Pastor Carter and my man Mark Porter.
That's right.
But they do a great job. They have a food pantry over there. They're serving, and it's always a call. Hey man, how can I support you guys in what you're doing? And we work together on some different things to ensure that those essential needs are being met, because we know that there's vulnerable population out there who don't have the income that, you know, some may have. You know, we want to be out there to be able to support them, because when we look at Dallas and household income, you're talking about 27% of the people out there are less than $25,000 for a household.
For a household.
Yeah, and then if you take a look at that income between $25,000 and $50,000, that's another 27%. So you're talking about almost half the population that is here that is making under $50,000 in a household.
And the numbers seem to just keep rising for as much as we're getting these profitable enterprises that are moving into Dallas, and people are finding Texas and Dallas to be, you know, a good place to start their businesses. We're seeing this income and this poverty gap widen. I mean, we're looking at sometimes in certain areas, depending on if you looked at this by zip code, 45, 50, or even 60% of the residents are poor.
And that's a hard thing. You take Dallas median income, you know, around $45,000 in comparison to the U.S. as a whole, $55,000. I mean, so there's a gap there that you have all this big business that's coming to Dallas, but man, there's still a lot of people out there that's not benefiting from that.
Right. And then you start to think of this idea of proximity, right? So even with proximity, Dallas's median income is way lower than Fort Worth, but would people say that Dallas is a more metropolitan area? You would think that the median incomes will be higher. Fort Worth's median income is a little over $54,000, while Dallas's is only $45,000. Even San Antonio, which is a much smaller city, their median income is higher than Dallas. So, you know, it stands to reason what's going on that systemically we cannot seem to break the chain of poverty here in Dallas.
Something has to give. So when you talk about, you know, Texas as a whole, talking about 1.5 million people. I'm sorry, 1.5 million children. 1.5 million children live in poverty.
Wow.
And it's like, how do we make that shift? And it has to be a much more global answer to this all.
So here's me being provocative, right? So
okay.
I'm gonna do,
because you
fairly controversial right now. There is this concept out there, right, of profit in poverty. Is that a driver of poverty in Dallas? So let me tell you, according to Wikipedia, right, the term poverty industry or poverty business refers to a wide range of money-making ideas and activities and businesses that attract a large portion of their business from the poor because they are poor, right? And so you're talking about large sums of money being made and moved around on the backs of poor people. And so inadvertently is that system keeping folks poor? Because if you dismantle poverty, then there are going to be some business implications. Provocative, huh?
That's provocative. That's kind of deep. Sister Ross.
So because for the life of me, for a while I've been thinking, and I was like, I just can't understand why. And I get it. It's not a black and white, right? It's not a simple one layer kind of problem. It is very nuanced. But I feel like a city that can be so advanced in so many other areas, we should be able to make some movement around poverty in Dallas. And so there is a gentleman, Matthew Desmond, who wrote this book called Evicted. And basically the book follows 8 families, black and white, through their process of eviction. Mm-hmm. And he ties their real life experience, their transformational experiences, to the transactional attributes of poverty. And one of the things he outlined was that when folks who are trying to eradicate poverty or address it or whatever, and they have these conversations with folks who would deem themselves middle class, they find that middle class people have an inaccurate perception of what poverty is, right? So he said they did a study, and they took this group of middle class folks that they were asking for donations on this tour to some of the areas where the donations could be used. And as a part of the tour, they got to go into the homes of some of these poor families. And in one of the homes, they saw like a big screen TV, and they saw that one of the kids had on, a new pair of sneakers. And so after the tour, they're doing this debrief, and they found that the middle class people were feeling incredulous, and some of them were even angry when they walked into the home of a low-income household that had a big screen TV and their children had on new shoes, knowing that those children probably received free and reduced lunch. Like, it was almost like in the back of their mind, we want you to act poor. We don't want you to experience the luxuries. And if you can do that, then you don't need me. But they don't understand that poverty causes you to get stuff and do stuff that we wouldn't necessarily think to do. And having worked in these neighborhoods, I tell you, I promise they ain't pay full price for that big screen TV.
Yeah, I'm sure about that. I mean, but we have to do something about this. We said earlier that 1.5 million of Texas children live in poverty.
Yeah.
You break that down, about 35%. Dallas has the second highest child poverty rate in the U.S.
Not in Texas.
Not in Texas, but in the U.S.
Who's the first?
You got who's the first? Philadelphia.
Wow.
Philadelphia has 30. They have a 36%.
Yeah.
Man, it's heartbreaking. So been there. Family. We grew up in Dale's home in Portsmouth, Virginia. And here's the crazy part is that we moved out when I was 10, but I can only remember great things. Now, maybe because I was 10, right? Or under 10.
Right.
And, I don't know what life problems is, but even when I look back now, it's like, I can see a couple of things like, okay, but like, I just remember good times there.
Yeah.
I mean, family, hide and go seek, 1:00 in the morning, we're playing, family sitting on the porch, we have block parties, somebody comes out and play. I mean, but living in that environment, it's not like, everybody see doom and gloom, but there's a lot of love and a lot of family connection and engagement that goes on in there. And there's this sense of people looking out for each other that's, in those communities too. And then, you go to the extreme end on some things also. And I have a few stories like that, but I tell you, my experience in living in the projects and living under what we call poor, man, that's just great memories for me.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment because we absolutely grew up poor, but now that I think back on it, I don't think I realized it as a child because you really just don't know that you don't know. You kind of key in on something. Mm-hmm. But now that I look back on it, there were absolutely times that my mom would have to go down and we would get the food boxes, right? And we would, she would have to go alone because the way the system was set up was that if you were married, they wouldn't give you a box because they figure, well, if it's, a couple, you guys should be making money. That was patently untrue. So my mom would go down and get this box of food, and my dad would kind of wait down the block or around the corner and then help carry it home. And then I remember getting the box at home, and we'd have to put away this food. Like, we were excited to get, but the food in the box, first of all, the cheese that you used to get, when I tell you that makes the best macaroni and cheese ever. Oh, my mother could work magic with that cheese.
That's a mean grilled cheese to go along with that too.
Yes, sir. But then the other stuff in the box literally would be a can with a white label with plain black block letters that said beans. Or one can, my favorite, the one that just said pork. I don't really know what was in that can, but we were able to get that, and when we got that, we were like, okay, there's stuff in the cabinets. Now, I will say, we didn't really eat that pork. We was a little nervous of that can, so that one was for last.
Okay,
we didn't really, because I don't pork. It just said pork, and it had a little picture of a pig on it. So there's that. But you don't know as a kid, right? You just like, okay, this is how people live. This is what you do. You could kind of see the stress on your parents, but it's not until you get exposed as an adult that you realize, oh yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, and one of the things, and that really concerns me right now, is around education, because that's one of the biggest drivers when you talk about poverty. If you don't have a certain level of education, it's just hard to be able to move on. And so when you have a lot of nonprofits that are working in this space now to really allowing young people options as it relates to education, because education is not always 4-year education.
Right.
It is, you got the technical side of things, you got vocational, you got, community college. And I would tell you that, man, the community college system, Dallas College here, I think is all that and some. I'm going to give a shout out. We've had my man, Dr. Joe Seabrooks, on the Cosmetic podcast in the past. And just to be able to talk with him, partner with him, and how they address, so yes, they address the educational needs there because kids are going to school, but they spend a lot of time in the space of those individuals. So not just the student who's taking a class, but that individual who lives in this community, and what is their welfare like. They want to provide the different services, and so on campus they're distributing food. Shout out also to President Bob Mung, also over at UNT Dallas, in a great way. I mean, that UNT Dallas, for a 4-year school, yes, they're about the education, but they dig deep down into the community to make sure that their students have the different resources that they need just to survive.
Right, that wraparound programming concept, that the idea that their students come to them as whole, people with these multidimensional challenges and things that get in the way. And I mean, even when you're talking about education, most people, would assume that we're always talking about post high school. But when you live in poverty, just getting a high school diploma can be a challenge in and of itself. And how do we help people at base, right? Get that, there are very few options for people without that base of at least a high school diploma.
One of the great things I'm proud of is Giselle Patterson, our executive director for the T-Boone Pickens YMCA and the scholarship program that she leads.
Yay, Giselle!
Yeah, yes. I mean, that scholarship program is incredible.
And it's a 4-year scholarship.
It's a 4-year scholarship, and then $2,000 a year that you can get. And I can tell you that makes, now you don't know nothing about that because your kids, they have full scholarship.
But they mama didn't. So I understand how wonderful $2,000 can be.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But we got to take a look at what Dr. G, who leads our Y Achievers work with the YMCA Metropolitan Dallas, she does a fantastic job providing different opportunities of options for these young people to go into STEM. And again, it's not looking at just the 4-year angle of things, but it's looking at, hey, here are things that you can do right now to provide some source of income for you. If you do this thing right, you can get that right now.
I mean, and make a lucrative amount of money, like a decent, she just kicked off this cybersecurity training program for young people, right? And so the idea is you come to this training class for a number of weeks and you're certified in cybersecurity. And then then they help place you. Like, they help with job placement and cybersecurity and all of this online presence and jobs in the technological field are skyrocketing, right? Like the opportunity is there, and you don't have to go, definitely don't want to discourage anyone from getting a 4-year degree if that's what they choose, but you can get that and get your certification and work and try to lift yourself or your family or whomever out of poverty. Like there are absolutely a lot of different ways that folks can get out of poverty, but I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about some of the systemic triggers, right? So there while for as many things as there may be available to a person to kind of combat poverty, there are some systems level, some really baked in, things that keep people from really being great, like the young folks say today. They just won't let them be great.
And what would you say some of those things may be when you think about those different systems?
Yeah, so for instance, mixed income housing,
okay,
right? Having the ability to live somewhere where the schools may be better, where you may have access to transportation a little easier, where you may be closer to a job that could pay you more. That's a systemic barrier, because for some of the landlords that own some of these large complexes, they don't often take folks who fall within a certain income range, right? And they have their ideas and their pros and cons on why they don't do that. But when you clump folks together and everyone is poor and there is a low per capita income, then the businesses don't go there. Then the access isn't there, and those folks kind of get blocked in to this little area, and they don't have anything to pull from. There's nothing there available to them. Like there are a number of places in Dallas like that. South Dallas, for instance, is when you have a place where people live and they don't have a grocery store, there are no entertainment options, there are very few transportation outlets. It is physically chopped up by highways and overpasses and railroad lines. Then how do we systematically create a physical space where poor people just can't seem to get a leg up?
And so one of those issues with UNT Dallas, again, I think they're truly about trying to how you break some of these systems down. Because one of the things that they face is that what they understood was the population who was coming to the school.
Yeah.
And so UNT Dallas is not a very old school, but it's definitely one of the fastest growing universities in the country right now. And it's located on the south side of Dallas.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know Dallas, who may be listening out there, Dallas is a very segregated place. There's a south side and there's a north side. And the south side is where you have lower income households at. But what UNT Dallas understood was that we need to make school affordable.
Yep.
So that when you walk out of here, you don't have debt.
Right.
And they have that right there. So box check. And then we need to give people who live in Dallas access to this university, because we know the students that we're attracting right now, students who are going to be a little bit older, and then folks who may not be able to pay the high cost of what tuition is. And so they built in a transportation line, bus line to the school.
That was
and so
innovative.
They fought that.
Yeah.
And some may say, like, why are you bringing that? Because you got to know where UNT Dallas is. It's not highly populated around there in terms of businesses and all that.
Nope.
Definitely neighborhoods and communities around there, but you're going to that destination for a specific reason. Right now, that's go to the university. But what people do recognize is that that place is a hot spot, and in the future, there's going to be homes that's going to be built around there. There's going to be big businesses that are going to be around there.
Yeah.
But we have to be able to get people they have to get people to this place of receiving education. Again, whether that's 4-year, 2-year, vocational, whatever the case may be, we got to keep providing programs that will afford people opportunity to be able to learn.
Yeah, because just like our title implies, right? Brother, Can You Spare a Dime, which was penned during the Great Depression. Poverty is not new. It is not a new concept in this country. It is age old, but there are some new and some innovative solutions solutions like what UNTD is doing. There was no bus that ran out there before, but there were communities and pockets of low-income families who lived close to that campus. And when they advocated and worked with the transportation system to put a bus line out there, not only did they give people access to their school, they automatically opened up doors of access to that community. Because those folks had never had, the opportunity. Imagine your closest bus line was miles away and you'd have to take it as far as it goes and then walk the remainder, of the way. And so they've taken, and how does that impact you getting to work and getting your children to school and getting home from work and the time it takes to do those things? And so when they moved specifically and intentionally into that lower income community and started busting up some of those systemic barriers, they are lifting that whole community up and serving what they primarily do is educate people.
Right. Yeah. And so we got to be able to advocate for kind of this public and private to be able to come together, work together to help with some of this, because Dallas as a city may not be able to bear all the costs. Yeah. But there's enough people that are coming in town, enough big business that is coming in town to be able to help support, creating some level playing field of sorts for some number of people. We may not be able to resolve it all 100%, right? But I think we can do some more proactive things to be able to get that there.
Yeah, and possibly they can. Like if you have different groups working on different things and really getting at the systems level, like that's what I find the most appealing is we absolutely have to do the things that work on the symptoms, like our food distributions. People are hungry right now. While we're trying to figure this thing out, you still got to feed people. Or if they need financial assistance in order to participate at a program at the YMCA, we absolutely need to give them the resources. But when you pull those people together, those businesses, that private and public, coming together to look at systems, and let's break up some of the systems that just keep people in need of food and keep people in need of financial assistance, then that's where the beauty comes. And we just got to get more people just looking at it from that perspective.
Well, we talked about a lot of great organizations there together. Harmony with Mark Porter, Brian Carter over there. UNT Dallas with President Bob Mung over there. Dr. Seabrook out at Cedar Valley College and Dallas College System.
Of course, the YMCA Metropolitan Dallas with our college scholarships.
Yes. And you kicked it off, like I said, with our Callison initiative. Appreciate you doing that right there.
Thank you.
Listeners out there in your communities, what is it that you can do to advocate for change, to be able to support people who may be in that vulnerable population of poverty? So thank you guys for listening to Cosmetic,
where we're tackling topics and telling the truth.
Hey, subscribe and listen to us weekly.
And give us a review.
And as always,
be dynamic,
be phenomenal,
be cosmetic.